It is, or it should be over right now for Donald Trump. It is outrageous that this man is sitting in the White House. There is, as you know, a massive cover up going on with regard to the Epstein files. And there is a development since what we spoke about yesterday. So I just want to refresh your memory by sharing with you the basic factual details of what a credible victim reported to the FBI and sat down at least, I believe, 4 times with the FBI, including one interview that we have seen in the Epstein file release, right? And we know that this woman had accused Jeffrey Epstein of sexually assaulting her when she was between the age of 13 and 15. And this is in the files. And that she also claimed that Jeff Epstein introduced her to Donald Trump. And that Donald Trump, either in New Jersey or New York, she said, pushed her head down, forcing her to give him oral sex, and she bit him. Obviously, a sign of fighting back and resistance. Don't we always tell people to do that? And then he punched her in the head after that. This is her reporting. And this reporting is not just in the Epstein files, right? But it's all over the news now. It started last week when Roger Solenberger put 2 and 2 together and realized that this reporting in the Epstein files from that might have been 2 different people was the same person. And we have NPR, and we have MSNBC, and we have CNN, and now we even have the Wall Street Journal reporting on this. And the news has been, up until some extra piece yesterday that's so important, is that there is a log of these interviews that was given to Ghislaine Maxwell, identifying documents that were handed over to Ghislaine Maxwell in a list of people that were not going to be called as witnesses at her trial. And so these are like numbers stamped onto documents, a listing of these documents. And this log is in the Epstein file release that we have seen. What we reported yesterday, which is what NPR and others have said, is that there are around 50 pages of documents that were never released by the Department of Justice. 50 pages. And these constitute 3 interviews that this woman had with the FBI, right? We've only seen one of them, and it's largely redacted. But even that one mentions, tries to avoid talking about Donald Trump. What we also know is that this woman sued the Epstein estate after he died. And what earlier reporting had said in South Carolina, that her lawyer, who is actually a very prestigious lawyer who works at Lisa Bloom's law firm and represents many Epstein victims, her lawyer had indicated publicly years ago that she had settled the case. We also know that, when you settle a case, you don't have to usually report to the judge the settlement, you just withdraw. And so she dropped her case at the time of the settlement. We also know that she was later deemed ineligible for the Epstein Victims Fund, which makes a lot of sense because she had settled her case already. Now, this is, for example, you might apply to be part of this Epstein Victims Fund. If you settle out separately, obviously your case would not be, I believe, part of that fund, right? This is what we know, right? Even the Wall Street Journal is reporting this. But But what is huge, guys? What is the huge new piece of news? Comes from the sleuthing of lawyer and MSNBC commentator Lisa Rubin, a former federal prosecutor who was going through the files and searching and came upon, and this is like stunning. Let me lay this out for you before I share the clip with Lisa. She found in the Epstein files a memo written by Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche. And this memo was dated January of this year. So this was after the deadline when all of the documents were supposed to be released. But in that time period, remember when they were claiming, oh, there are millions more, we didn't know about these, right? And this is a memo in which he's giving the reviewers instructions about what they're supposed to turn over under the legislation, and also what he would like them to flag. In other words, any document that they search and they see that had certain attributes or talked about certain subject matter, he wanted a number or a code put on it. For example, on that list was any mention of flight logs. If you hear flight logs mentioned, flag it. Okay, and I'm going to go through that with you in a moment. One of the things on the list was anything mentioning a 302. 302, and you've probably heard this a lot on the news, is a number given to the form that FBI interviewers use when they summarize their notes. And it's a report, a 302 report with a witness, right? Or with someone making an allegation. So this 302 was one of the tags, very short list of things. He wanted it flagged. Okay. Now, what that indicates is he wanted the opportunity to look through every single FBI witness statement before it got released. Also in this memo are instructions about what can be redacted, crossed out, whether an entire document should be redacted or just pieces. And let me tell you, there are things on there, lists of things that he thinks should be redacted that go beyond what the legislation allows. You heard me. Todd Blanche told people there who are reviewing documents at the DOJ that they should redact certain names and information that is not permitted under the law passed by Congress. This memo alone warrants, and I'm not talking about flagging these, I'm talking about redacting. This memo alone, I believe, warrants impeachment on its own. Now, the Congressional Democrats, I know, and the House Oversight Committee want to get answers here, right? And they want to know specifically, they know these documents exist. Why weren't they produced? What is the reasoning? And is Todd Blanche's reason? Because under the legislation, one of the reasons has to be if it, victims' names under the legislation or ongoing investigation or attorney-client privilege. Those are like the limited types of things. So is Donald Trump under investigation for this alleged crime? Because it's one or the other. The attorney sitting down with an FBI agent and his client does not get attorney-client privilege protection. It just doesn't. Only these internal conversations with your lawyers do. And it's even more complex than that. When you talk to the other side, about something or the government, you have waived any privacy privilege on that. So the only thing is, if this entire documents have been withheld, the only legal reason for that would be, one, they don't exist, which is impossible. Two, that Donald Trump is under investigation, we need to know. Or three, that this was a deliberate violation of law or just an accidental, coincidental oversight, right? That maybe somehow they got pulled aside and somehow Todd Blanche forgot to produce them. Well, here is what's crazy. This is a headline right here. This is not the Wall Street Journal. Here's a headline: DOJ to review whether Epstein files about Trump were improperly withheld. Okay, this is insane. Using passive voice in a headline, you need to rewrite this. The Department of Justice is to reveal whether the Department of Justice improperly withheld Epstein files. How's that going to go? Are they going to say they properly did it or they improperly did it? Or oops, right. You can see the problem there. Now, I want to now share with you, just so it's super, super clear what I'm talking about, because I described it, but I want to give credit directly so you can hear her. This is Lisa Rubin. She's on, I keep saying MSNBC, but it's MS Now. And she's on with another former prosecutor named, I think it's Barrett Bergen. There they are. Let's take a listen to Lisa explaining her discovery. Then I'm going to circle back and show you pieces of the document so you can see that it's even worse than you think.
Lisa, you are all over this. What are you learning now?
Well, Anna, this morning I was looking to see whether the Department of Justice posted any new documents this morning regarding the alleged victim that we reported on yesterday. We thought maybe our reporting and that of NPR and an independent journalist named Roger Sullenberger might have changed what they were willing to post. I didn't find any new documents about the woman who accused both Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump of sexually assaulting her when she was 13 or 14 years old back in the 1980s. But what I did find absolutely stunned me, and that's a January 4th, 2026 memo from Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche. I just want to situate the date for you and our viewers. December 19th was the congressionally mandated date for compliance with the Epstein Files Transparency Act. And yet on January 4th, Deputy Attorney General Blanche is writing a 9-page memo to people at the department who were charged with doing the first level review of documents for production. And one of the things that the Deputy Attorney General instructs them to do in this memo is once they determine that something is responsive to one of the 9 categories that Congress mandates they need files for, he says there are some types of documents that we want you to particularly flag or tag while you're going through them in the electronic database, and one of them is something called a 302. Barrett knows this well as a former federal prosecutor, but a 302 is the form.
Sorry, I want to show you. I'm pausing her for a second so you can, I think, see the 302s, right? So this is on the list. He says 302s, apply this tag to all FBI 302s. That's Lisa saying that. And I've got another for you. After that, this is the context for that. You see this list? This is a part of the memo. It says, if a document is tagged responsive, please proceed to evaluating whether it needs a content tag. So one of the content tags they have is flight logs. Now keep in mind, it looks like these are, do you see how these content tags say 2A3 or 2A6 or 2A7? That's in reference to the statute, I believe, statutory sites, right? But then 302s, not something in the statute. He just wants to make sure those get tagged. Now, I want to back out of the shot so you can see flight logs. They want to be able to take a special look at those names, right? And also the word destruction. If anyone talked about destroying or concealing documents, he wants to review that. Okay, I'm going to continue with Lisa now.
Are all over this. What are you learning now?
Sorry.
Well, of documents for production. And one of the things that the Deputy Attorney General instructs them to do in this memo is once they determine that something is responsive to one of the 9 categories that Congress mandates they need files for, he says there are some types of documents that we want you to particularly flag or tag while you're going through them in the electronic database, and one of them is something called a 302. Barrett knows this well as a former federal prosecutor, but a 302 is the form that the FBI uses to memorialize interviews. That's the exact kind of document that we reported yesterday was missing with respect to this particular accuser.
That is so interesting. And now we have a response from the DOJ as they are facing more and more questions about where these missing files are, why they're missing. And in a nutshell, their response is nothing to see here, saying anything that's been removed is for redactions to protect victims and would be promptly restored. And, quote, all responsive documents have been produced unless a document falls within one of the following categories: duplicates, privileged, or part of an ongoing federal investigation. So the question I have, Lisa, is do we know what category these specific documents would fall in, if that's the reason given for withholdings? And did they address specifically these documents we're asking questions about?
No, they did not. And in fact, I think the statement that you're referring to talks about documents that are deleted. Here, what we are discovering doesn't lead us to believe that any documents were suddenly published and then deleted. I want to be really clear. We don't believe that they were ever published as part of the Epstein files to begin with. And as for the categories that you're talking about, there is nothing in an FBI interview memo that could be considered privileged. There's nothing in an FBI interview memo that could be considered a duplicate. When the Department of Justice is talking about duplicates, they're usually talking about email chains. The obligation is to produce the most full version of that chain and not the first version of the message. It's not.
Okay. You get the idea. So we have this issue, right? It's pretty damn serious. It really is. And fortunately, we're seeing some of the news outlets lead with this, right? But, and of course, as I mentioned, we're seeing this Wall Street Journal piece. Now, I want that to go away. Here's the Wall Street Journal article. It came out yesterday. DOJ, and again, DOJ, to review whether Epstein files about Trump were improperly withheld. This actually is the Wall Street Journal headline that I showed you earlier. Again, a little bit of a paradox that we are asking the DOJ itself to review itself, right? Now I'm gonna remove this story for you and just say, interesting that they put Jeff Epstein's photo, not Donald Trump, on this, right? So this is, though, at least in the Wall Street Journal, and we have a Justice Department spokesperson there say, should any document be found to have been improperly tagged in the review process and is responsive to the act, the department will, of course, publish it consistent with the law. Well, good for you. So the article does go on, of course, to, at the very bottom, talk about what might be missing here. And they quote Robert Garcia, who said that I'm quoting, oversight Dems can confirm that the DOJ appears to have illegally withheld FBI interviews with the survivor who accused President Trump of heinous crimes. Okay, and then sort of in the very end, right, the very end of this, we get the last two paragraphs of this Wall Street Journal article because they're reporting, but obviously the editors are burying the lead. It says, the South Carolina accuser joined a Jane Doe lawsuit in 2019 against the Epstein estate, claiming Epstein sexually abused her around 1984 when she was about 13. The lawsuit said Epstein flew her to New York and trafficked her to prominent, wealthy men. And it says the woman was deemed ineligible for the Epstein Victims Compensation Program, court show, and her suit was voluntarily dismissed in 2021, and her attorneys declined to comment on Wednesday. Now, as I told you previously, her attorneys have commented that she settled that lawsuit in 2021. And this was reported out in many places, including behind the paywall articles of South Carolina newspapers, which I decided not to pay for a subscription for those. But trust me, the reporting is that the lawyer has previously said she settled the case. Now, there are all kinds of reasons why you can settle a case. It could be because it was meritorious and you got a settlement. It could fund money. It could be also that you withdrew it and settled for nothing. We don't know that. But what we do know is that This was considered serious enough that the FBI conducted 4 interviews, including before Jeff Epstein was found dead in prison. This is all 2019, and after. And we know that it was important enough that it was raised in the slideshow presentation created last summer of 2025, around the same time the Department of Justice was saying there's no names here, there's no client list, there's no one to investigate. Just after Pam Bondi said it's all closed up, we're not investigating anyone, this slide presentation was created that I showed you from, that's on the cover slide for today, with this accusation. And then we get more information in this last document production, but not everything. This is a problem. This is worse than any of the other people in the United States who have stepped down from their roles. This accusation, if true, against Donald Trump should require his immediate resignation. But of course, I don't think someone who was convicted of fraud, 34 counts of fraud, should be president. And I don't think somebody who was adjudicated to be a rapist, or under the parlance of New York law, sexual abuser of E. Jean Carroll, should be president. However, this, you would think, would be a bridge too far. This will be his legacy and the legacy of everyone else who is covering up for this child rapist. That's it. She was between, we're seeing, even with the files I looked at say she was between 13 and 15, we're seeing reporting that she was between 13 and 14. People, this is a child who was trafficked, and he forced her to try to sexually assault her, and she physically resisted, and he punched her. This is the allegation. It's unacceptable. I will not drop this. Now, in our category of how are those Republicans doing with this information, I'd like to share this clip with his rep, Grothman. And I apologize, it's gross. Not graphically gross, but morally gross, but we'll talk on the other side.
Grothman, you are on the Oversight Committee. In attendance last night, several members of the guests that were invited, victims of Jeffrey Epstein. Your committee's investigating that. What more do you think needs to be done on this front?
Well, we want to look in. I think one of the things we ought to be doing is looking for other people who can give us more information. You know, I'm going to be present, I intend, on Friday when we depose President Clinton. I don't think he's the most honest person in the world, so I don't expect to get a lot of breaking news out of him. But perhaps some of the other characters who are around Epstein Island, the other characters who staffed Jeffrey Epstein's airplane, will be more forthcoming and tell us a little bit more that's out there. You know, we've heard of a lot of famous people who've already been caught in this net. We know, who the problems are. But I think there are a lot of people I'd like to yet know. I do think that perhaps early on, some of those files disappeared. But, it says something about the elite of this country, and it seems largely we're dealing with liberal elite, though not exclusively.
Largely we're dealing with liberal elites, but not exclusively? Really?
Their sexual mores are very different than that of the average American.
Liberal elites' sexual mores are different than the average American. This isn't about sexual mores. This is about power and rape and violence and cover up. This is not about sexual mores. And by the way, how about Donald Trump?
When you say disappear, can you elaborate on that?
Well, I think early on, and I'm saying going back over 10 years ago, I think when they went into Jeffrey Epstein's I can't remember if it was an apartment or offices or whatever. I think things were left unattended for a while, and that was wrong.
And before we let you go.
Okay. He thinks some things got destroyed. Okay. And I love how casual he is. His home, his office, whatever. Whatever. Like, what a jerk. Now, who is he accusing of destroying things? Epstein. He's saying 20 years ago. Okay. What is he talking about? Is he talking about the first arrest when Acosta was the attorney general in Florida? Or is he talking about the recent raid? And what is he suggesting isn't there? Because you know what? The files we're talking about that haven't been produced were there when Ghislaine Maxwell needed them. And that was just a few years ago. And friends, they're still somewhere. Now, I have, before we get to Crazy Town, a palate cleanser because I saw this put up on the We Rate Dogs Blue Sky feed. And it was a dog, a new puppy in the snow. And I feel like for my, I would say my physical or my relational or my intellectual or my spiritual health. I think for my mental health, and I think for yours, you might like this dog in the snow, puppy in the snow. And then I've got a second after this. Okay, I need to watch that with you again, guys. Puppy in the snow. And then I've got another pet video for you. You see how happy I am when I see a puppy in the snow. And now I have, oh, darn it. I know okay. I have, I want to share this with you, and I think I downloaded it. I've got a Tank, our tortoise mascot update. And let me see if I can get this. I think I downloaded it. Woohoo. Give me 1 second. Tank's mom sent this to me. And let's get it. What? I just did it. I thought I just downloaded it. Just trust me. Is it in my downloads? Oh no. Okay. Give me 1 sec. I swear to you, this is my, okay, let's do this. And I feel like, okay. Sorry guys. I'm gonna save you the Tank video for tomorrow. I think we can do puppies today and we can do our tortoise tomorrow. And now, my friends, it is time for some Crazy Town. I think we also deserve that. Okay. Here we go. Elizabeth Holmes, Theranos CEO who went to prison for fraud, etc. Remember, she had the corporation that was doing blood testing, that was faking the results. Anyway, she said, my prison camp let inmates stay up past count for the BET Music Awards. Last night, they wouldn't let us watch the State of the Union. The Bureau of Prisons would rather we be entertained than educated. The system is broken. Pardon me? No, really, pardon me. That is what she is getting at here. You know, self-interested, racist, pandering to Donald Trump. And let me tell you, if you think she would be getting an education from that State of the Union, that's not what she's looking for. She's looking for a pardon. There you go. I will see you in the morning.
Hello, prison and we are together in this democracy we work for. And again, welcome to the Jen Taub Show.